In our last video, we set up some assignees, some manufacturers, models, and categories, and now it's time to start adding some equipment into our inventory. Let's imagine I've received a shipment into my warehouse that we set up in the last video, and we want to take all of the equipment in the shipment and add it into the inventory system. Let's go ahead and do that now. If I go to the Items tab, you can see in the list right now I have no items. We haven't added anything yet. So let's go to Add. When we go to Add, we're going to first pick an assignee. So I received this into my warehouse, so I'm going to pick the warehouse. Next, we're going to pick the manufacturer. So let's start with the Generi routers that we set up in the last video. They're in new condition, they're functional. I'm going to say these cost $89.95. And what you can see down here is a spreadsheet that we can use to bring all of this equipment into Sonar. This is a very flexible way of you getting data in. You can paste data in here, you can type it in. There's a lot of different ways we can get data into the system. So let's start with the most inefficient way, which would be to type it in by hand. So I'm going to start by typing in a fake MAC address. And let's do another one. Okay, so we got a couple of fake MACs now. You can see it's still pretty quick. I can go ahead and type these in and do 100 if I wanted, or 10 or 20, but by putting them in manually we got a big margin for error and it's still fairly tedious. So let's look at another way of adding these. This time I'm going to pick my Super Firewall. Again, these are new and functional. And the reason we're putting a purchase price in here is we can use this later on if we want to sell these items to customers. We can calculate our profit margin, or we can do things like depreciation reporting. So on this one we had a serial number and a MAC. Let's start by entering a couple of MAC addresses by hand. And now let me show you another way to do data entry with a serial number here. So I happen to have a couple of boxes here with barcodes on them, and I'm going to use my handy barcode scanner to scan these in. You can probably hear it in the background. And you can see that we can barcode scan in here very quickly. This is automatically moving down to the next row in the column after I do my scan. And what's really useful with this is if you buy a lot of equipment, you're probably aware that if you buy, say, 50 routers or 100 routers, they'll often come in a shipping box, where the box on the outside has a barcode that will give you all 100 MAC addresses or all 100 serial numbers in a single scan. And so if I had a barcode like that, I can just click in the first row, scan in all 100, move to the next column, scan in the 100 MAC addresses, and I'm done. Really easy. So let's take a look at one that's a little more complex. If we pull up my wireless biscuits, and let's put in a price for those. You don't have to track a purchase price, by the way. If it's not something you care about, if you don't want to do any depreciation or sales in Sonar, you don't have to put that in, but it's probably good practice just in case you do in the future. So let's take a look at this one. Now we've got this spreadsheet with 4 columns, and the problem we're starting to run into here is it's pretty unlikely that my box that these are shipped in come with 4 different barcodes on with all this data available. I probably am going to need another way to get it in here. So the lucky thing for me, and this is pretty common if you're buying things from a distributor, is that my distributor gave me a spreadsheet with all of this unique data laid out in it already. And you'll find this to be the case typically when you're buying items that have a lot of unique fields, that you're going to be able to get some kind of document with them or with the invoice that lays out all of that unique data. The problem is often, even if you have that document, if you don't have a system that makes importing that information easy, you're still stuck. You've got the data, but how do you get it into your system? So if we click on this menu over here and I do import CSV, I can go ahead and grab my CSV. I'm going to tell it to ignore any empty rows, and I'm going to import that. It's now dumped all the data straight to the spreadsheet, and if I had 100 rows or 1,000 or 10,000, they would all just get dumped straight in here like this, and I can review them, make sure, for example, this column says it requires a decimal, that's right. I can make sure this one requires a number, that's right. I'm going to go ahead and verify and add these. So this has come back with an error. Let's take a look at what happened. You can see this column's highlighted. So the problem here is that in this particular row, this column needs to be a number, and somebody put the word 8. So I'm going to replace that with the number 8 and fix that. If we take a look at this MAC address, this MAC has got a Z in it. Well, a Z is not a valid character for a MAC address. So I'm going to take a look at the box this came in, and I'm going to fix that. I see it should have actually been a 1. And now I'm going to add these. And so you can see when you're importing something like a spreadsheet, it's very easy to still do a review in Sonar. If there's one error somewhere that you need to fix, you can do that very easily. And we've got a lot of error checking in place. That's why we set up those different types for the columns when we were creating our model, so that we can validate things like that when they're put in. Let's do one last one here. I received a shipment of cables. These cost me $109 each. And you see for this we only get a quantity, and the reason we only get a quantity is we didn't set up any model fields for this model. It's a generic item. These are just Ethernet cables. So for some items like this, you probably don't care to track them uniquely. What you care about is tracking them as an overall quantity. I care about, if I only have 50 of these cables left in my warehouse, I want to order more. I don't really care to identify which 50 they are individually. It doesn't really matter to me. They're just consumable installation supplies that I use. So I'm going to go ahead and add 100 of these. That's what I bought today. Okay, so now if I go back to my list, you can see those items we added are now available in this list, and this is very high level. We can see the manufacturer, we can see the model, I can see how many I have. That's pretty useful information, but frequently we need to get more in depth than this. So let's start with a couple of simple filters. If I take one of the MAC addresses that I entered for my wireless biscuits and I search for that, you can see it brings it up right away. I have one that matches this MAC. I can drill in and I can see here's the MAC address that matches. So if I'm looking for a single item, I can use the search to find it quickly. If I copy the serial number from right here and we go back and we search again, it's found me the same item. There's a lot of other ways we can filter here if we're looking at things less specifically. If I click this icon up at the top right here, this brings me up with a number of filters I can use. So right now our default is all undeployed equipment that's unconsumed, and we'll get into consumption in a little bit, that's functional. Those are my filters today. We can layer more on top. I can say I only want to see my Frisco equipment. I only want to see items that were added after a certain date or before a certain date. I only want items in a certain condition. Or I don't want to see everything that's undeployed. I only want to see things in this warehouse. I only want to see things in this technical support vehicle. And these all layer together. So now we're saying in this vehicle, made by Frisco, unconsumed, functional. The other option we have here is the ID. We can search for items by ID, and you'll notice if we go back and drill into this item, there's a little ID shown in the corner here. And the value of searching by ID is if someone says to you, I need you to fix this item, somebody put something in wrong, they set the MAC address wrong or something like that, you can ask for the ID and you can just find that right away. So now that we're drilled into this one, let's take a look at some of the filters we can do here. We have 4 items shown. There's a lot of data shown about these items, the status, the condition, when it was purchased, who it's assigned to, or how much it was purchased for, who it's assigned to, and all of those fields that we input. You'll notice when we're drilled in here we have a couple of other controls. One is this sorting control, so I can sort by any of these 5 things, descending or ascending. And I can also click this Fields button to bring up these options to filter by a specific field. So the reason this is useful is, let's imagine the sort of inverse scenario that we had of when this equipment was shipped into the warehouse. Now I want to give this equipment to my installer. I want to put some of it on his truck, but I don't want to put all of it on his truck. I want to find some specific items. He's just brought me some items and I want to quickly find them all. So let's start with our wireless biscuits. I can come here to the MAC address field and put one in, and it's found that one. Let's say there's one more. I can put that in and search for it, and now it's found those 2. Let's say there's a final one. I'm going to grab that and put that in, and now it's found those 3. Because this field is treated like a tag like this, again, I can input data into here easily. I can use my barcode scanner, and I could be scanning these in as he brings them to me. I could be typing them in, I can paste them in, but it's really flexible. It's an easy way to do this. So now we've identified 3 items. Remember, all of these filters would apply. I could have used other filters if I wanted here to pick a condition or where these currently are. If I wanted to make sure these were in the warehouse, I could change the assignee to the warehouse. But now we have these 3 items selected. I want to move these items into my text truck. So there's this button here that says 3 items. This shows me how many items are currently matched by the filters I have applied. If I click on that, I can do a mass action on the items that have been found. I can edit them, I can delete them. Let's edit these. I'm going to change assignee, and I'm going to move these to truck 1. Now when I save this, what you'll notice is these have all disappeared. If you recall, we changed this to the warehouse assignee, so now this doesn't match anymore. But if I was to change this to truck 1, I can now see the items in truck 1. I'm going to just reset all these filters and take this back to normal. So let's step back out of here now. You can see how we quickly did a mass assignment change. I moved 3 of my wireless biscuits from my warehouse into my truck. But now when I'm at this top level, I see 4. Well, the reason I see 4 is I reset my filters. My assignee is set to all undeployed. So what I'm seeing right now is overall across my whole inventory, how many undeployed wireless biscuits do I have? But I can just quickly change this to truck 1 and see all of my tech has in truck 1 is 3 of these items. Let's move something else. Let's move some cables for him as well. So if we look at the cables here, I have 5-foot blue Cat 5e cables. I have 100. I can't drill into this. It's not clickable because they're generic. We don't need to see each individual item. We have a little menu here where we can edit items. So if I pull this up, it's going to give me an option. How many items do I want to edit? Right? So let's say I wanted to give him 10. What we would want to do here is we'd want to make sure that the items we're looking at are the items we want to move. And so I want to make sure if I move 10 cables to his truck, they are cables that are in the warehouse. So I'm going to change my location, my assignee here to my warehouse. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to set this to 10 items. I can use the slider, I can type in. I'm going to change the assignee, move that to truck 1. Now when this updates, what you'll notice is because we have this set to the warehouse up here, I now have 90 cables showing. I have 90 left. If I move this back to all undeployed, it shows 100 because across my whole inventory I still have 100 cables. If I change this to truck 1, I can now see this tech has 10 5-foot blue cables and 3 wireless biscuits. So by using these filters, we can always figure out where items are, who has them, what kind of state they're in. And if I wanted to bring some of these back off his truck, for example, maybe he says I only need 5, I would want to make sure I'm looking at his truck. I have the assignee set to truck 1. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to say, okay, let's move 5 that are on your truck back to the warehouse. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how simple it is to do work in here, how easy it is to move things around, how you can use the filters to find the data you're looking for. And there's a lot of things you can do externally with this. Like every other feature in Sonar, we have a full API around the inventory. And so you could easily use the API to tie this into an RFID scanning system or any other kind of external inventory tracking you want to do. So in the next video, we're going to move on to talking about consumable items, about how to assign items to customers and network sites, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up.